Welcome to Good Girls Gotta Heal. I'm Megan Walsh, holistic trauma therapist, and I am so excited that you are here with me today to take off that good girl mask and finally embrace your most authentic self. On this podcast, we dive deep into the realities of healing childhood trauma. You'll learn how it shows up in your adult life, from anxiety and perfectionism to relationship struggles and difficulty setting boundaries. We are going to shed light on all the hidden connections that you need to know. Whether you're just starting your healing journey or looking for some ongoing support, Good Girls Gotta Heal is a safe space for you to explore your experiences and build a life full of authenticity, ease, and meaningful connections. Let's go, good girls. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode. I am Megan Walsh, your host, and I am so excited to be here with Casey Stevens. Casey is a spiritual psychotherapist, coach, healer. She is clinically trained and mystically guided. Oh, what a fabulous tagline. Welcome, Casey.
Oh, thanks, Megan. So delighted to be here. I've just kind of admired you and your work for so long, and so delighted to be connected here
Oh,
with you.
thank you. Right back at you. I am so excited to have you here and just to dive into everything that you specialize in. I would love to start a little bit of maybe if you could tell us how would you describe spiritual psychotherapy
Yeah.
and perhaps the journey that you have gone on that brought you to this work?
Sure. So for me, I think it's sort of like spirituality and spiritual psychotherapy is even broader than any religion. It's sort of the umbrella above that, right? Which is wonderful because it means that I get to work with people from every facet and, denomination. And I mean, it's just like, how do we weave all of that together? And so I really think at its core for me, what spirituality is and how then we intersect that with psychology is it's really the relationship with everything. So understanding everything is an energy, everything has a consciousness. And so what is that relationship that we have with absolutely everything, with a higher power, with ourselves, with any relationship that we have, with the earth, with the past, with the present, with
Yeah.
all of it, right? And
Uh-huh.
so to me, it really is like, how do we take our clinical training, right, that we both have
Mhm.
and expand that even broader to include our spiritual self and what all of those relationships then would be, and how does that help to expand or amplify or even make more unlimited our relationship with our healing. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a way that we can just kind of like blow the ceiling off of all of the constructs that do come from
Yeah.
this clinical
Oh,
training and have a deeper reach. So I love practicing, although it can be kind of confusing, right, for some people to understand, like, what is this spiritual psychotherapy?
mhm.
So yeah, it's really kind of a lens that I view the world. And then of course it makes it just like, I think when we take our own kind of interpersonal relationship with ourself and our own healing and our
Mhm.
own kind of ethos and vision of the world, and then we
Mhm.
merge that with whatever training we have, I think that
Mhm.
just makes it unique and special and allows us to be more powerful. So
Yeah, I love it. I love that, it's almost right like the relationship to everything element. Like it brings this additional dynamic into the room, into the therapy space. Like it's another piece to engage with. And as a trained creative arts psychotherapist, right, like the creativity is always the lens that I've brought in as this additional
yeah.
dynamic that just totally expands the work in this really profound way. So I love that so much. I love this concept. And I wonder, can you tell me what does it mean for you to be mystically guided?
Yeah. I think it's my intuition, right? It's the
Mhm.
way that I perceive the world that is maybe not really easy to quantify, although I know how I experience it. And I think we all have this magic in our own way.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated to have conversations with people and just learn, like, how do you tap into that intuition inside yourself? And
Yeah.
so I receive it in certain ways, other people might receive it in different ways, but really kind of living in alignment with that intuition that's inside of you,
Mhm.
just in your own life, in my own life, right, is really a
Yeah,
powerful thing that I've had to kind of
totally.
cultivate and work on to reconnect with that, again, like intuitive or spiritual self.
Yeah.
And when we're guided by that, kind of inner knowing and we
Mhm.
listen to those, I just find that everything clicks in and flows so much better and
So
life
true.
just works.
Yeah.
And so I've certainly had times when I've gotten out of alignment with that and not listened so much to those like inner knowings,
Hmm.
but I've really worked hard to kind of get back into alignment with that, with
Yeah.
myself. And so then how does that incorporate into my practice is it just allows me to show up and have again, just like this deeper reach into you and what I'm perceiving and what, information I'm getting about you that allows our healing to be
Mhm.
just, again, more expansive,
Yeah.
more guided, right? And so it's
Mhm.
listening to that, which I think comes from this more divine place, but
Mhm.
it's also the relationship with ourself that we have to really cultivate
Yeah.
too. Just
Absolutely.
listen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do it.
Yeah. I'm so curious. How did you develop your inner knowing, develop and really hone in your intuition, and how do you receive it?
hmm Well, good question. So I think I always had it. I think I always actually had a pretty strong inner knowing. And then, of course, all of the compensatory strategies and the
Mhm.
layers of life and just,
Yeah.
how that kind of we separate from that as kind of authentic selves. And so it's really been my journey to come back to that and listening to like, how does my body respond? So for me, I feel it a lot in my body.
Mhm.
And there's different types of kind of intuitive knowing, but for me, I really receive it in my body. So it's like clairsentience or claircognizance. So I just know it. And
Yeah.
I can tap into some of the other ones, but I'll just know something, or I'll even be in a session with somebody and it's just like some vision or some
Mhm.
word, something comes
Yeah.
through, right? And I just feel like if it feels right and it's not
Mhm.
intrusive and it feels like it would be
Yeah.
valuable to them, then I share it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a feeling. So
Yeah.
as we all know, right, trauma is stored in the body.
Yeah.
And so I will actually feel if I'm sitting with somebody, I will feel that come through and I'll just feel like where they have trauma stored in their body, or all of a sudden I'll get something that's stuck in my throat or my belly or just something that's coming through and I
Yeah.
can physically feel it.
Yeah.
There's just this way that is, I mean, could be lots of things, but for me, I've
Sure.
really learned to cultivate and understand just like, oh wow,
Yeah.
I'm getting an impression of what you're experiencing in my
Yeah.
body. And so
Mhm.
what's beautiful about that is if people aren't in touch with that, or if they get stuck in some way, then me just reflecting and holding that container of like, I'm feeling a lot of stuff in your throat right now, or I'm feeling,
Mhm.
whoa, this whole left side of my head is like tingling or just something. It
Yeah.
allows them to access and tap into something that they may not otherwise be able to do. So
Yes.
mm, how I cultivated that is I just kind of learned I mean, certainly I've studied different things, but it's really learning to listen to like say those things and
Yeah.
notice is it so valuable for people when I do, right?
Yeah.
They end up really
Totally.
like seen and known and understood and like, oh my gosh, I am feeling exactly what you're saying. I'm experiencing that right now. And I had no idea that that was, something, right, that I needed to acknowledge.
Mhm.
And I just think again, as you know, with trauma, right, like going into it, meeting it, fully greeting it and acknowledging whatever is there to
Yeah.
be expressed, like sometimes that's all we need to do, right?
Oh gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like one of right the most powerful elements of the work. And as you're describing this, I'm remembering that even in my own therapy process, my own journey, one of the most profound moments was when and my therapist, has used this in a similar way and me as well of he would always say like, I'm really holding a lot of anger here. And I
Yeah.
this was like early on where I'm like, I'm not angry.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
not. And so much of that of just his reflecting that of like, whoa, I'm experiencing a lot of anger. And through, many years learning that, whoa, that was a big shadow part of me that
Yes.
I wasn't allowing myself to feel just in the naming. It's so powerful. And so I've like just totally absorbed that and used that as well in the
Yeah.
work because like, whoa, if I'm all of a sudden hit with like a wave of sadness, there's is so much power in naming that of like, whoa, I'm feeling really sad right now. I wonder how that's sitting for you and how
Right.
that's landing for you. And
Right.
so, wow, it
Yeah,
is.
it becomes an expander, right? It just opens
Mhm.
people up and allows them to. And sometimes, there's like a rejection of that, just to your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh no, 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 no. But if someone really can sit with that and
Mhm.
allow you to be, and really it's so much, I mean, the relationship that you
Yeah.
develop. trust and
Right.
safety. All of those things is the
Totally.
most paramount thing that you can offer anybody. And so when you do
Mhm.
offer something like that, it's like, oh, okay, I can let that in enough,
Mhm.
and maybe then we can move through something that's felt really stuck for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it comes through for me. And I just, again, I've learned, I think it's so important when we, as practitioners, as individuals, we just acknowledge what we're receiving
Mhm.
and name that. And we don't have to go around projecting that. But again,
Mhm.
when the invitation is there, when we have
Right.
a contract with someone to do healing in this way,
Mhm.
such a beautiful way to, not
Yeah.
just do kind of like the basics, right? It
Right.
helps to
Right.
really simplify things and move.
Yeah, it takes it to another dimension, right? Like a like
Yes.
the total embodied space of,
Yeah.
hey, I'm right. Like, just you don't have to tell me the story necessarily, but I can let's look at where how are things landing? How are you experiencing yourself here and now?
Right.
Let's go there, which that in itself, as we know, right, is such a powerful healing practice for someone to be able to experience the full extent of themselves in the presence of someone else who is very attuned to it. And just like that attunement
Yeah.
being, right, such a
So,
reparative
yeah. Yeah.
experience.
So healing just to have that alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Awesome.
really how it works. And I had to learn that, by almost like I mean, I can also be super sensitive in my body just in general. And so
Mhm.
I feel all of these things. And if I don't acknowledge them myself, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's my own healing journey, my own healing work, just to like, how do I move this through and not have pain or, all of these sensations that I might
Mhm.
otherwise have? It's like they
Yeah.
really need to be acknowledged and expressed. And so I've just learned how essential that is for me to do. And so I know how essential that is for other people to do too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, how old were you when you started to understand this? Like when you kind of had, I'm sure there was probably an awakening moment of like realizing, oh, all this stuff that I've been holding, right? Like ha teasing apart what is yours, what is not yours, right? What is intuition, what is anxiety? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I always kind of talk about like I had this awakening, which was totally unchosen by me, right? It was really as a result of everything in my life falling apart. So I was like in my late 20s, early 30s. I went back to school. So I didn't go directly into school. I had kind of
Mhm.
like what I call my a past life, a former life. All of that really started to unravel, and it had been really idyllic. And I didn't have a lot of childhood trauma. Like I really
Mhm.
actually had a pretty relatively as it could be wonderful upbringing, right? And
Yeah.
great parents and all of that. And for me, it was in that relational framework. So I got married quite young
Mhm.
to my husband who had a lot of mental health struggles and a lot of history with that in his family that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can imagine all that that was.
Yeah.
And so it just really that being kind of unhealed in him
Mhm.
ended up becoming this just dynamic in our relationship that
Yeah.
eventually struggled. So what that was for me was sort of like him kind of unraveling, but not really choosing to heal or seek any, help for that in a
Mhm.
meaningful way. And so then
Yeah.
me doing all kinds of things, over functioning and trying to figure it out. And then
Mhm.
him going to therapy and then us going to therapy. And then eventually it ended up being me in therapy where I learned so much about myself.
Yeah.
So again, I'm like in my late 20s at this
Yeah.
point. And eventually through that, right, really recognizing, hey, I can't control anybody. I can't force anybody to change. I can't, like
Mhm.
he has to want to do that. And so
Yeah.
I ended up continuing with the therapy on my own. And I was really blessed because my therapist really kind of practiced in this mystical way, right? She was very
Mhm.
intuitive, but also clinical, which I appreciated
Yeah.
because I'm definitely wired in that grounded way. Like
Yeah.
I want to psychoanalyze things,
Yeah.
right? I want to understand myself. I want
Totally.
to, dig in and chew on things deeply. And
Hmm.
so we could really do both of those things. And it ended up being sort of like the end of that marriage. I ended up, that didn't work out. And then I
Hmm.
decided like really everything in my life crumbled. So I needed to redo everything. I mean, I had worked, but I didn't really have like a meaningful career. And I thought, I need like everything in my life needs to start over. And
Yeah.
through this work with her, I discovered I really wanted to do this work with other people and in my own way. But I also wanted to make sure that I was bridging these two worlds. And so, because I knew how healing it was for me
Yeah.
when she held space for me in that way. And so I said to her one day, I think I want to do what you do. And of course, this is like in the total destruction and ending of my marriage, my
Yeah.
life.
Yep.
like everything just was like
Mm-hmm.
falling apart. So then I went back to school, and I guess I was probably still in my late 20s when I did that. And then by the time I got clear about it again, and a lot was awakening for me in
Yeah.
terms of tapping in, and she held space for me in that way. So it helped
Mm-hmm.
me reconnect to those parts of me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, went back to school. But by the time I got the vision and the clarity to do that, I just knew
Yeah.
how I wanted to do it. And I was just very intentional and very deliberate about it. It
Yeah.
wasn't wishy-washy at all. It was like I just clicked into it and knew this is what I'm
Yeah.
going to do.
This is
I'm
it.
going to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that continued to be an awakening process because of course there was lots more just as all of that unraveled,
Mm-hmm.
and you go inside yourself and you're doing all of this, like,
Yeah.
going through that clinical work. Like it really is,
Mm-hmm.
like the self of the therapist emerges, and you're doing so much inner work in addition to the inner work that I was already doing, in addition to my marriage falling apart and so many other layers, my husband continuing to struggle, and just the way that
Yeah.
that
Of course.
unfolded. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and then I just kept cultivating it and cultivating it, and then giving myself permission over time to actually open up and express myself. There were even a lot of fears just around like my spiritual self, and how do I practice, and will that be accepted, you know,
Yeah.
in this community,
Yeah.
right? Therapy,
Totally.
because I want to practice a little differently than we're being taught, or than, most people
Uh-huh.
do. And so I just kind of kept stepping into that. And every time I did, I was rewarded for it, meaning
Mm.
it just was so much better when I did it the way that was true for me. And
Mhm.
so yeah, that's been definitely a journey as well. But
Ugh,
yeah, just kind
I
of,
love that.
yeah. So
Yeah, and I love how you're describing, right? Like before every moment that you stepped in and right, everything was better. Like you were clearly standing there with a lot of discomfort and fear and uncertainty and insecurity around, oh my gosh, but like what happens when I do this? Right? What happens when I leave the marriage or right, do practice differently than other therapists? Right? Like the fear being, oh no, right? Will things be worse? But I love how and so much of the work is right, tolerating the discomfort and continuing to move towards the knowing, right? Towards the alignment, towards what is most right for you. I always tell clients, what is the next, like, let's look for the next right step for you. And I love that in taking that and just right that coming from internally and not externally, right? Because it sounds like everybody externally would tell you something different. But this was so inner led. I love that
yes.
so much. If you are someone who is ready to really dive deep into your healing work, you may be ready to step into my self paced course called The Healing Practice, a gentle guide to childhood trauma recovery. Now, when you enroll in the healing practice, you will walk away with a deeper understanding of your past in order to help you feel empowered as you move forward into your future. You are going to learn the steps to cultivate self-compassion and build self-worth. Guys, truly self-compassion, it changes everything. You are going to learn specific concrete communication tools to create more authentic, connected relationships. You are going to learn tools and practices to regulate your nervous system, because this is the ultimate path into trauma recovery. You are going to receive guided visualizations and reflections to deeply connect to your inner child, and you will leave with a step-by-step framework for your own daily healing practice. I love this course so much. It is really the core components of everything that I teach and share with all of my clients. If you are ready to begin this healing journey, use code HEAL and you will register for 50% off plus 2 free months inside of my membership, the Cycle Breakers Collective. And inside the Cycle Breakers Collective, you have 2 opportunities per month to get direct one-on-one support from me. So, you guys, this deal is incredible. I hope you hop in to the healing practice with code HEAL. And I'm curious, what advice would you give to someone who might be at that point of like, oh, I feel like I know that this is best for me, but I'm terrified to do it. What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, I often think about, like, we really need to make a relationship with the unknown, because everything, like, again, if you think about what consciousness is, it's like at this
Mhm.
moment, I know everything that I presently could know, right?
Mhm.
But there's something beyond that. And
Yeah.
so often our most common fear is this unknown. And we don't have to know what is coming, but everything that hasn't yet existed in our life that could be good. And most people go to the fear of like, oh, well, that's going to be bad, right? And I've
Mhm.
certainly done that myself. But really, like this expansiveness, this infinite quality of life, this like anything beyond what's presently painful or not healed inside of us exists in that space because we haven't experienced it yet. So,
Mhm.
really recognizing that the unknown is our friend, and the best way to kind of merge with that is to listen to your internal guidance and
Yeah.
just take the next step. You don't have to do some
Mhm.
wild, outrageous leap that feels like too uncomfortable, but just
Yeah.
what's right. How do you listen to that inner knowing and take the step, the small baby step, right, into that
Yeah.
space? And
Right.
so you can't end up in a bad place, right? And you're
Uh-huh.
supported from expanding in that way. And so I would just say
Yeah.
listen to that, don't be afraid of the unknown. Everything beyond your present consciousness lives in that space. And so what
Yeah.
is it that you can't imagine yet, but lives kind of in that more infinite quality that you want to
Yeah.
connect? How
Yeah.
it can be better than that? So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so, so helpful to take in and really internalize. I love that. The relationship with the unknown being a really, it's a good one, right? It's sure it's scary because we don't know it yet, but we need to trust it that it's going to become the knowing that we have for ourselves and for where we want to be. And I'm curious, tell me a little bit more about your understanding of consciousness and if there's a way to kind of put some words to that for the listener who might be wondering, like, what does that mean? What do we mean by levels of consciousness?
yeah. Well, it is very multidimensional, and just kind of like on a psychology lens, it's really understanding that there's our conscious mind and then our subconscious mind.
Hmm.
And mostly our lives are driven by our subconscious mind. And that it makes up, as scientists say, like roughly 95% of
Yeah.
who we are and how we're operating, right?
Hmm.
And so consciousness kind of in that psychological framework is really just understanding the subconscious and the conscious mind, and how the conscious mind is so, we small, and yet we
Hmm.
think that we know everything, right? The ego thinks it knows everything,
Right.
really doesn't, right? And so
Yeah.
it's really taking that, what can be shadow material or what is subconscious or what is all the programming that all the compensatory strategies, like what is driving habitually our life, the trauma responses we have that are unknown
Hmm.
and invisible to us.
Yeah.
It's taking all of those and becoming aware. Self-awareness really, I think, is the first step to any healing. And
Hmm.
so it's taking all of that shadow material and bringing it into the light. And so how can we take what is 5% and increase that percentage by scooping this subconscious material into the conscious awareness, right?
Hmm.
And it's really beyond that, kind of like on a consciousness level, right? In this more spiritual framework, the way that I think about it is there's lowercase c and capital C consciousness, right? And again, if I believe, and people can believe whatever they want, but I
Hmm.
believe that we live in an animate universe. Everything is energy. We
Hmm.
are living in a field of energy as well. And so we can connect to anything through all time and space, really, in this other field of energy. And so then we can connect to, like, even if we're doing inner child work, we can connect to the consciousness of that inner child.
Hmm.
And time really is an illusion because that child can be in the
Yeah.
present moment with us or projected into the future, and we
Hmm.
can collapse all of that and go back and we are doing this all the time, right? When we're in a trauma response or when
Hmm.
our inner child is present, is we're
Yeah.
time traveling. We're actually in
Yeah.
another dimension. We're another age. We're not our present. I'm not 42-year-old Casey,
Hmm.
right? Like I am in this other space. And so
Yeah.
how do we really understand that and go and work in that timeline
Hmm.
and know that that's absolutely available to us, because that version of us is actually driving the show so often. And
Yeah.
so it's really understanding that it's, again, bringing awareness
Mhm.
to whatever version of ourself we need to. Sometimes it's a future self, sometimes it's our present self, sometimes it's a past,
Yeah.
and just really making it like bringing awareness to it and identifying what needs to be done here. What
Yeah.
healing needs to be done here? Do
Hmm.
I just need to attune? Do I
Right.
need to understand something? Do I need to, incorporate some shadow material? Like
Hmm.
what is necessary here?
That is so powerful. And I love that, right? All of these versions of ourselves are always with us. It's not, we didn't leave them behind. They're here, right? They're right here. And I've had actually quite a few people that I work with recently talk about like, I don't have the memories. Like, I don't know if I can do this inner child work because I don't have memories from then. And I said, like, we are doing this work is actually cultivating new experiences and new memories with that piece of you, right? We don't have to have all of the, right, the conscious awareness that that version of you had, because we know, right? We know what that version of you experienced, and we can relate to them now, like here and now. We can give them a new experience now. And that is part of this work, and actually like such a profound, powerful part of this work. And I could just see, right, like the shift of like, oh, what? Like how empowering that felt of like, oh no, it's not too late. Right? Like you're always right on time at
Right.
any point, any given point, which
Yeah.
is
If it's coming through, right, you're ready. To add to that, and I know you know this, but for your listeners, it really is remembering that if something is showing up in your life that's not really in service to you, like it's expressing. So you don't have to go back and re-traumatize yourself or find the memories. You don't have to do that. But if there's a dynamic or dimension inside of you that isn't as healthy as it could be, then really that developed somewhere along the way. And so
yeah.
really we have to work with that and understand, well, why is this expressing, and is this how I want to live? Because again, the trauma lives inside the body. So if we're struggling in some kind of way, the body does remember. So how do we extrapolate that? How do we understand how you compensated in order to deal with whatever memory you can't remember, but there's some compensation that happened along the way? I always talk about adaptive and maladaptive, right? It's like we adapt at a certain time because it's necessary.
Mhm.
Um, and almost always those adaptive strategies become maladaptive. And so if
Yeah.
there's something maladaptive expressing itself in your
Mhm.
life, then how do we
Yeah.
identify what's maladaptive and
Mhm.
decide what we want to live instead? And so
Mhm.
I know, again, of course, all of that, and
Mhm.
that's the work that you do, but
Yeah.
it's really, we don't have to go back and re-traumatize. We don't have to
Right.
remember. We don't
Mhm.
have to access. It's expressing itself in the present
Mhm.
moment, and you're locked in another timeline that's not of service to you. And so how
Yeah.
do we come up to speed and get into the present timeline, right? And
Yeah.
our best
Yeah.
life. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love hearing you describe it in this way, because it is such a powerful reminder, right? It's so like as you say it, I'm so excited, right? Like I get really excited to do this work, right? Because there are so many possibilities to, right, to change the script, to change the narrative, to change the ways that it always has been. You are not stuck there. That there is, right, always the possibility to rewire, to rework, to re-experience, to re-embody. And
yeah.
I'm curious for the listeners, what would be any tips that you have around maybe some more embodied practices that can help them to connect to their body, to listen, to read, to understand what their body is telling them?
Well, I always think about it as tracking the energy. So when I
Mhm.
work with you, we start like what's coming through. Sometimes again, it's like, how do we tap into the pain body that lives there? Whatever would be a barrier to us really listening to our body and just being able to relate on, again, in a present moment of like, okay,
Mhm.
this is coming through and then it's going out, right? We're not holding, there's not a compression or a compounding,
Mhm.
impact that's happening inside of us. So if there is anything that's coming up, which could be anxiety, it could be pain, it could
Mhm.
be any of those things, right? So we
Yeah.
almost have to like remove all of that debris so that we can
Mhm.
actually get a clearer lens of everything. So I track the energy in that, right? It's again that description that I gave earlier that I sometimes will hold a mirror so that people can like tap into. It's like, okay, well, if I'm just stuck on this base, I can't get past something, then let's go into the body and identify what's going
Mhm.
on and where we're feeling it and what we're feeling and where that might have
Yeah.
come from, how long we've been feeling that,
Mhm.
and then heal it, move that along, right? Because it does always move along, and then
Mhm.
learning to listen to just that data, that material that's coming through. And again, that was a lot of my own healing of just learning like
Yeah.
what's coming through. Man, like for me, like I've had migraines in my life and I'll
Mhm.
get them. And so it's really learning. I can start to notice when my shoulder will start to kind of tinge and then I have a little tension. And then before it has to like move up and express itself as a migraine, what is that trying to tell me? Right?
Yeah.
The body is always giving wise messages that we can listen to and understand that there's something that has nothing to do with my body. Right?
Mhm.
My
Yeah.
body's just the densest level of that it's
Right.
expressing itself. Like,
Mhm.
what is it that's coming through that needs to be expressed, that needs to be acknowledged, that's happening, right, in my emotional framework or my mental framework or something
Yeah.
external to me, my relational framework? Like, what's happening that
Mhm.
is coming in and trying to tell me, you know, something doesn't feel right here, or
Yeah.
you got to listen to this. And for me,
Hmm.
that is my intuition. So for me, I've learned to listen to my message, right? If I like
Hmm.
start to feel this creeping up my shoulder before it ever has to get to a migraine, how do I listen to what that's trying to tell me? What is
Yeah.
happening? What am I experiencing?
Right.
What am I not listening to or not acknowledging? What am I not taking action on?
Hmm.
Any of those things.
Yeah.
I can really prevent myself from feeling this. And so you get into this really kind of intimate, but also immediate relationship where if you learn to listen to whatever that is for you and how that expresses in your body, because we're all different,
Hmm.
some people it will be a tummy ache, or some it will be
Yeah.
all different things, or you'll feel this, anxiety, or you'll have these thoughts that all of a sudden pop in. How do we
Hmm.
listen to that so that we can have a very direct relationship and we can respond appropriately in the present moment? And that's
Yeah.
what to do is removing all of the old debris and then having an active and present and intimate relationship with ourselves in that way. So
Yeah.
that's how I do it. You do
I
it.
love it. I love it. So powerful. I mean, in the same exact way, right? Of just the noticing, okay, what is happening in my body? And then what is it telling me what need is there, right? What am I not listening to? That's so, I mean, just in the most basic way, that is it, right? And even as you name your shoulders, I'm like, like I notice like, ooh, right? I'm not extending in the way that actually feels most connected and aligned to me. So just making those subtle shifts and doing, making those shifts in a repeated way. I always will share with clients that just because, right, it's not perfect today, or if you learn it and you get to that aha moment of, ooh, I know that when I sit this way, I feel like, right, I'm more open, my breath is deeper. And just because all of a sudden I notice, oh no, I'm not doing that, it doesn't mean I'm failing. It actually just means like, wow, way to go. I have the awareness, right?
Right.
To shift. And it's just returning to that moment of the awareness and the shift repeatedly. And that's really what that, right, what that healing, what that growth, what that deepening of your own practice and connection to yourself is, and how
Yeah, and we
powerful
don't
it is.
arrive at some place. I mean,
No.
I'm you and I both like it's really sort of being in the becoming of that all the
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
I still have those things creep in, and
Yeah.
sometimes I ignore them, and sometimes I get a mic, I mean, it's like
Hmm.
you really have to just
Right.
live more in the practice
Mhm.
of how do I acknowledge this though, because
Yeah.
that really is the subconscious matter, right? That really is this shadow matter that oftentimes it's like, okay, I'm feeling something, I ignore it because all the reasons that I can
Mhm.
justify for doing that.
Yeah.
But how do I get into the practice of really acknowledging this? Because it's really important, right? This is sort of how
Yeah.
I can be an expression of
Oh,
myself. And
absolutely.
yeah.
So important. So important. Casey, I feel like we could talk for a long time,
Oh, I
but I
would love,
know we are coming to an end, but we will have to absolutely do this again,
oh, I would
because I feel like there's so much we can dive into. But I'm wondering, how can people find you and what do you offer?
Oh, yeah. Well, my website is shrinkbigger.com.
Mhm.
So you can find me there. And I have newsletters and things like this that I end up sending out just to kind of share with my listeners so they can have free content and just,
Mhm.
have exposure to other people and how they're working and like all the resources, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Love
one
it.
place. Go check that out. Or I'm on Instagram and YouTube and all those places at Shrink Bigger. And then my name is Casey Stevens, so you can also find me that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, if I always think again, just I'm big on intuition, I'm big on listening. So if there
Yeah.
is some guidance that you have that you really want to work in this way because it's a little different,
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
reach out. I'd be happy to connect and
Amazing.
see if there's something valuable there. So yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Definitely check Casey out. We're going to put all of your information into the show notes so you can access her page and her website easily. And again, Casey, thank you so much for being here. It was a joy to get to connect with you.
Likewise, Megan. I loved being in your
Yes.
energy.
Oh, ditto. Ditto. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Good Girls Gotta Heal. I am so grateful to have you in this community. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That helps us out greatly. And we will see you next time.